King Charles was accused of never having met Prince Archie or Princess Lilibet after a panelist used those exact words during a televised royal discussion. The sentence sounded like an insider admission, and it was quickly treated as proof that every earlier account of family contact had been false. From there, the accusation widened into claims about photographs, births, privacy, succession, and even the existence of the children themselves. But a later palace source timeline described the Highgrove reunion as the king's first meeting with the children since 2022, not his first meeting ever. So did the broadcast expose a royal secret, or did one inaccurate word turn a painful 4-year separation into something the receipts do not support? The difference between never met and not seen for 4 years is only a few words, but it changes the evidence, the accusation, and the reputational damage. Never met suggests that Archie and Lilibet were never introduced to their grandfather, and that every report suggesting otherwise must be wrong. Not seen for 4 years describes estrangement. A family relationship existed, contact stopped, and years passed before another private meeting. Both stories are emotionally serious. Only one can be supported by the dates currently available. Royal receipts, therefore, has to begin with the sentence itself, identify what authority stood behind it, and then compare it with the public timeline, rather than treating dramatic wording as a palace record. The speaker in the circulating clip was discussing another family's private history. The sentence did not come from King Charles, Prince Harry, Meghan, Buckingham Palace, or an official spokesperson speaking on the record. That matters because an admission must come from someone acknowledging a fact within their own knowledge. A panelist can report information, interpret events, repeat a briefing, or simply speak imprecisely. Without the full segment, the speaker's exact role, the words immediately before and after the quotation, and the source behind the statement, never seen, remains a claim. It may be newsworthy, but it does not become official merely because it was said confidently on a large television platform. This distinction is central to the royal receipts method. Not every royal statement carries the same evidentiary weight. A panel remark is one level. A named journalist citing sources is another. A report attributed to a palace source carries greater weight, although it still requires careful wording. An official royal family publication is different again. When those levels are mixed together, opinion can begin to sound like confirmation. That is exactly what happened here. The televised phrase was elevated into a bombshell disclosure, and then the lack of an immediate public correction was treated as further proof. But silence from the palace does not authenticate every sentence spoken about the royal family. The first problem for the absolute claim is Archie's separate timeline. Archie was born in Britain in May 2019, years before Lilibet was born in California. The royal family's official website records his birth and states that Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip were introduced to him at Windsor Castle on May 8th, with Doria Ragland also present. That official page does not document every private visitor, and it does not itself prove when Charles first met Archie. It does establish, however, that Archie was publicly recognized within the family from the beginning, and that a photographed royal introduction took place only days after his birth. The claim that no royal relative met him, therefore, fails immediately. Contemporaneous reporting also said that the then Prince of Wales met Archie shortly after the birth. That reporting must be described accurately. It is a name media account of a private family meeting, not a detailed palace transcript. Even so, it creates a direct timeline problem for the word never. If Charles met Archie in May 2019, then a later claim that he never met Harry's children cannot be literally correct as applied to Archie. The panelist would have been compressing 2 different children and 2 different histories into one sentence. That is why Archie and Lilibet cannot be treated as though their meeting timelines are identical. Lilibet's timeline is different. She was born in the United States in June 2021, after Harry and Meghan had stepped back from the royal duties and moved to North America. There was no comparable British infancy period during which regular royal contact could naturally occur. Her first widely reported opportunity for an in-person meeting with the wider family came during the Platinum Jubilee period in 2022, when Harry and Meghan returned to Britain with both children. Public photographs of a Charles and Lilibet meeting were not released, which left a gap. But a gap in public imagery is not the same as evidence that no private introduction occurred. Current reporting surrounding the Highgrove reunion places Charles's previous contact with the children in 2022. That later description is crucial because it does not call Highgrove a first introduction. It calls it the first meeting in approximately 4 years. The wording does not tell us how long the earlier meeting lasted, who was present throughout, whether Charles met each child more than once, or what happened privately. It does provide a previous timestamp. Once that timestamp exists, the original never-seen phrase becomes difficult to sustain as literal history. The stronger and more careful conclusion is that Charles had extremely limited contact with his Sussex grandchildren and then went about 4 years without seeing them in person. The Highgrove meeting also exposes the weakness of using photographs as the test for whether a private meeting happened. The July reunion was reported by major outlets, described as a private family occasion, and linked to palace confirmation, yet no family photograph was released. The king reportedly wanted the encounter kept private, and the public was not given a visual record of the children with their grandfather. If the rule is that no photograph means no meeting, then even the newly confirmed Highgrove encounter would have to be denied. That would be unreasonable. Privacy can keep an event out of public view without making the event imaginary. This does not mean photographs are irrelevant. Official images can establish that named people were together at a particular moment. The photograph of Queen Elizabeth, Prince Philip, Daria, Harry, Meghan, and Archie records one such moment. What it cannot show is every interaction before or after the shutter clicked. It cannot tell viewers who held the baby later, how long the gathering lasted, or who visited on another day. A photograph is strong evidence for what appears inside its frame. It is weak evidence for everything that supposedly did not happen outside it. The original video repeatedly treats the limits of a photograph as proof of a wider absence. A second supporting receipt was a screenshot said to show Kensington Palace announcing that a surrogate had been used. That screenshot has circulated online for years, but fact-checking found no authentic palace post or matching official announcement behind it. The royal family's own announcement of Archie's birth contained no such statement. A screenshot is not self-authenticating. It requires an original post, a valid archive, account history, timestamp continuity, or independent reporting from the time. Without that source chain, the image cannot be used to prove surrogacy, a deleted confession, or institutional panic. It is not a hidden palace receipt. It is an unsupported circulating image. Even if that screenshot had been genuine, it would not answer the central question about how many times Charles met his grandchildren. This is an important structural problem in the competitor video. Evidence about one issue is piled beside a different claim to create a darker atmosphere. A surrogate screenshot, a photograph, a metadata field, and a panel sentence may all feel connected because they concern the Sussex family, but they do not prove the same proposition. The central question is whether Charles had met Archie and Lilibet. Supporting material should either establish a meeting, contradict a meeting, or clarify the timeline. Material that does none of those things is emotional accumulation, not corroboration. The christening photograph metadata was used in a similar way. The video treated creation and modification fields as proof that the photograph had been taken long before the publicly stated christening date. But metadata can reflect copying, exporting, color correction, file processing, software history, or movement between systems. A modification date does not automatically become the date of the photographed event. The photographer said the image was not a composite and described the changes as ordinary adjustments to tone and exposure. Getty reviewed the photograph and removed a temporary warning. That does not make every royal photograph beyond question, but it weakens the claim that metadata exposed a fabricated christening timeline. Again, the metadata dispute does not establish whether Charles met the children. At most, it raises questions about the history of a digital file. The competitor uses it to encourage a larger conclusion. If one file looks unusual, perhaps every family event was staged. That is not how evidence works. Each claim needs evidence capable of proving that claim. A file field cannot prove that a grandfather never met his grandson. A photograph cannot prove the absence of a private introduction years later. A questionable screenshot cannot prove a criminal conspiracy. When unrelated doubts are assembled, they may create suspicion, but suspicion does not become stronger merely because it comes from several different subjects. The video also claims Meghan entered panic mode after the televised remark, and that reports of a meeting appeared as damage control. That interpretation depends entirely on timing. The stories followed each other, so the later event was presented as a reaction to the earlier clip. But sequence is not proof of cause. Bringing two children from abroad, arranging security, coordinating access to the king, and organizing a private meeting at Highgrove would normally involve planning that the public timeline does not reveal. It is possible that media pressure affected decisions. It is also possible that discussions were already underway. Without messages, schedules, named sources, or an admission, Meghan's alleged panic is unsupported. Private emotion is especially easy to invent around royal stories because silence creates space for narrators. Meghan was said to be panicking. Charles was described as complicit. Catherine's facial expression was treated as knowledge. None of those interpretations came with direct evidence. Royal receipts can examine strategy, timing, and reputation without claiming access to emotions that the people involved have not expressed. The stronger story does not require those assumptions. Charles had been separated from Archie and Lilibet for approximately 4 years. Harry and Meghan had serious disagreements with the institution over security, accommodation, media treatment, and their position outside working royal life. The children lived thousands of miles away. Family contact was rare, private, and filtered through competing public narratives. Those facts already create a powerful emotional conflict. A grandfather growing older while his grandchildren grow up at a distance is a real family wound. It does not need to be turned into a theory that the children were never introduced. The correction, therefore, should not erase the seriousness of the estrangement. 4 years without an in-person meeting is significant. Archie changed from a very young child into a school-age boy during that gap. Lilibet spent much of her early childhood away from her grandfather. Charles's health concerns increased the emotional stakes surrounding lost time. None of this establishes who was most responsible. Harry, Meghan, palace officials, security arrangements, geography, public conflict, and private mistrust may all have affected access. The timeline can show distance. It cannot assign every motive or distribute every share of blame. This is where the story connects naturally with many women watching. A mother can be questioned about decisions involving privacy and access without being required to place her children on public display before strangers will accept that private family life exists. At the same time, Meghan is not the only parent. Harry has also spoken about security, exposure, and his concerns about bringing his family to Britain. The palace controls whether its own private meetings are publicized. Charles controls aspects of his personal availability. When all of that shared control is reduced to Meghan hid the children, the wife becomes the sole explanation for choices made across an entire family system. The parents' desire to protect the children, combined with the palace tradition of keeping private family encounters off the record, created an information vacuum. Into that vacuum came anonymous reports, selective photographs, social media screenshots, body language readings, and increasingly extreme theories. Once children become evidence in an adult reputation war, privacy itself begins to look incriminating. If they are photographed, the images are analyzed for manipulation. If they are not photographed, absence is treated as proof that they were not there. That is an impossible standard for any family, and it places the greatest burden on children who did not create the conflict. The children also became symbols in competing arguments about the crown. To some viewers, their distance represented what Harry and Meghan had taken away from Charles. To others, the distance represented what the institution had failed to protect. The competitor video went further and treated their position in the line of succession as evidence of fraud. But no court finding, official investigation, or authenticated document was provided to support a criminal accusation. The royal family's official website identifies Archie and Lilibet as Harry and Meghan's children. Disliking the amount of public information available does not overturn that public record. There is a legitimate question hidden beneath the conspiracy. How should the monarchy document private facts that have public constitutional consequences? The line of succession is not merely a celebrity list, and public trust matters. But constitutional seriousness increases the evidence standard. It does not lower it. Claims involving fraud, parentage, or eligibility require authoritative records and lawful findings, not interpretations of hair color, eye color, clothing, or photographs. The original transcript offered genetic claims that were scientifically simplistic and personally invasive. Those claims must be removed, not softened, because they do not help establish the meeting timeline. The same applies to insults aimed at Meghan's sexual history, character, and former relationships. They do not clarify whether Charles met Archie or Lilibet. Their function is to encourage viewers to distrust everything associated with her before the receipt is tested. That is character substitution. When the evidence for a specific claim is weak, dislike of the person is used to complete the argument. Royal receipts must resist that mechanism. Meghan may be criticized where a verified statement or action supports criticism. The strongest case for continued scrutiny is narrower. The palace has not published a complete calendar of Charles's private meetings with the Sussex children. No public image from the reported 2022 contact shows Charles with both children. The full original panel segment may contain context that has not yet been examined. Different reports may rely on overlapping anonymous sources. Those limitations mean the public cannot reconstruct every meeting with certainty. They justify caution and further source checking. They do not justify the absolute conclusion that Charles never met either child. The strongest countercase is stronger than the original claim. Archie's official family recognition began in 2019. Contemporaneous reporting placed Charles with Archie soon after the birth. Later reporting placed previous contact with both children during the Jubilee period in 2022. The Highgrove reunion was then described as the first meeting in 4 years. These pieces do not reveal every private detail, but they align around one conclusion. Contact existed, became extremely limited, and stopped for years. That record directly conflicts with never met, while leaving room for uncertainty about the exact number and duration of meetings. Highgrove is the final and most revealing receipt because it demonstrates both contact and privacy at the same time. The family met, yet the public received no photograph, no detailed transcript, and no account of the children's reactions. That is precisely the kind of private event that conspiracy logic says cannot exist. The reunion therefore corrects more than a date. It shows why the public archive will always be incomplete when a family deliberately protects a meeting. An incomplete archive can justify questions. It cannot be treated as a complete record of absence. The location also carried emotional meaning without proving reconciliation was complete. Highgrove was part of Harry's childhood and remains closely associated with Charles. A private gathering there could offer a setting outside formal palace ceremony, but the setting does not tell us what was said or whether old grievances were resolved. Reports describe the encounter as a family meeting, not a return to royal duties or settlement of every dispute. Prince William was not part of the reunion, and the wider family rift remained. The receipt proves a meeting. It does not prove a restored institution. That distinction matters because royal headlines often turn one event into a total verdict. Before Highgrove, the claim was that Charles had never met the children. After Highgrove, some coverage risked presenting one private meeting as full reconciliation. Both are larger than the record. The evidence supports something more human and less complete. Relatives who had been apart for years met privately during a difficult period. The meeting may matter deeply without resolving security arguments, trust, media battles, or Harry's relationship with William. A meaningful moment is not the same as a finished repair. The final evidence verdict should therefore separate what is proven, what is credibly reported, what is disputed, and what remains unknown. It is proven that a televised panelist used the phrase that Charles had never seen his Sussex grandchildren. It is also established through major reporting that Charles later hosted Harry, Meghan, Archie, and Lilibet at Highgrove in a private gathering. The royal family officially recognizes Archie and Lilibet as the Sussex's children, and its website records Archie's introduction to Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip. It is credibly reported that Charles met Archie shortly after his birth, and that his previous in-person contact with the children before Highgrove occurred in 2022. It is disputed whether the panel speaker intended never, literally, whether the speaker possessed a specific briefing, and exactly what happened during private family encounters. It remains unknown how many times Charles met each child, how long each meeting lasted, what was discussed at Highgrove, and how responsibility for the years of distance should be divided among the adults and the institution. What the headline exaggerated was the conversion of one loosely sourced sentence into proof that every earlier meeting account was false. The supporting conspiracy then went much further, using an unauthenticated screenshot, misunderstood metadata, genetic speculation, and the absence of photographs to accuse a mother, 2 children, and the king of fraud. Those materials do not establish the central claim. The public timeline supports rare contact, a long separation, and a private reunion. It does not support imaginary children or a lifetime without introduction. The deepest lesson is not that royal reporting can never be trusted, nor that every Sussex claim should be accepted. It is that one word can control an entire reputation story. Never created a scandal about existence and deception. Since 2022, created a story about estrangement, privacy, and lost family time. The second version is still painful. It simply stays within the evidence. The question may be legitimate, but the evidence still has to earn the conclusion. For female viewers, the final wound is clear. A mother and her children were judged through what the public could not see, while the father, grandfather, palace, security system, and media all control different parts of the same record. The children did not create the rift, yet they became the evidence used to prosecute it. Privacy may deserve debate. Family access may deserve criticism. But neither justifies turning 2 children into suspects because adults kept their meetings away from cameras. King Charles did not need to have enjoyed a close grandfatherly relationship with Archie and Lilibet for the never-met claim to be wrong. The available timeline supports a colder, sadder truth. He appears to have met them, then spent approximately 4 years without seeing them in person. Highgrove did not expose imaginary children. It exposed the scale of the distance between real relatives and the power of a private meeting to correct a public exaggeration. So the final receipt is not a confession hidden inside a television panel. It is the correction contained in the dates. 2019 places Archie inside the royal family's documented early timeline. 2022 provides the previous reported contact with both children. 2026 brings the family together privately at Highgrove. Those dates do not answer every question, but they answer the central one. Not seen for 4 years is not never met, and a painful estrangement should not be rewritten as proof against a mother or her children.